Get back to the kitchen where you belong, you ghetto fraud. The words hit harder than the cake that followed. A triple-layer chocolate torte slammed into Dr. Aaliyah Brooks' face, frosting exploding across her midnight blue gown. Gas rippled through the New York charity gala. 300 guests froze. Then came the laughter and the camera shutters. Phones rose like weapons. Someone whispered, "Is she staff?" Another laughed, "Wrong party, maybe." The humiliation was live, raw, sticky, streamed to half of Manhattan. But Aaliyah didn't flinch. No tears, no anger, just those calm, surgical eyes locked on Madison Whitmore, the socialite who thought she'd won. The orchestra stopped. The chandelier hummed, and for one long second, power began to shift, quietly, invisibly, from the woman who threw the cake to the woman who wore it. Because Aaliyah Brooks wasn't broken, she was calculating, and the next thing she says will flip every screen watching. If this scene shocks you already, hit subscribe to Black CEO Stories, because you won't believe what happens next. The moment she opens her mouth, everything changes. The frosting drips slowly from Dr. Aaliyah Brooks's chin, landing on the marble with soft, deliberate splashes. Every sound in the ballroom seemed magnified. The clink of a dropped spoon, the nervous cough of a man by the bar, the faint hum of the chandelier overhead. But Aaliyah didn't move. Her stillness was unnerving, her silence louder than Madison Whitmore's cruelty. The cameras kept rolling. Every guest could see it, the difference between humiliation and composure. Aaliyah's expression wasn't one of shame, but of calculation. Beneath the sugar and chocolate smeared across her face, there was a glint of something far stronger than anger: precision. Madison, expecting tears or an apology, frowned. She had performed this kind of social execution before, public humiliation as power, but this time, the target wasn't reacting as planned. Aaliyah simply stood there, her spine straight, eyes steady. The longer she stayed silent, the more the balance in the room began to tilt. A man near the stage lowered his phone, whispering, "Why isn't she saying anything?" Another guest muttered, "She's too calm. That's not normal." Even the photographers hesitated, unsure which story they were capturing: the fall of a fraud or the rise of someone untouchable. The chandelier light caught the shimmer of her ruined navy gown, turning it into something almost regal. Her poise began to unsettle the crowd. You could feel it, an undercurrent of doubt spreading from table to table. Maybe she did belong here. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. Madison's smirk wavered, just slightly. She tossed her hair and barked a nervous laugh, trying to reassert her dominance. "Oh, don't go quiet now," she taunted, voice trembling just enough for the front row to notice. "Say something if you can." But Aaliyah didn't. Her silence became its own kind of statement, an unspoken promise that something monumental was about to unfold. And for the first time that evening, the crowd wasn't laughing at her. They were watching her. Madison Whitmore seized the microphone like a queen addressing her court. Her diamond bracelets flashed beneath the chandelier light, scattering reflections across the ballroom's gold-trimmed walls. The room was still frozen in disbelief from the cake attack, and she was eager to fill that silence with her own narrative. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice dripping with satisfaction, "this is what happens when people try to sneak into our world pretending to belong." A few guests tittered nervously. Others forced awkward smiles, not wanting to appear disloyal to the Whitmore name. Madison's father owned the hotel. Her family funded half the charity boards in New York. No one wanted to be seen challenging her, yet the discomfort was unmistakable, the energy in the room shifting like static before a storm. She continued, her words sharp and cruel. "I mean, look at her, covered in cake, standing there like she's one of us. Did she really think no one would notice?" The crowd rippled. Some people laughed, but the laughter was brittle, hollow. Others lowered their eyes, unwilling to be part of what was clearly crossing a line. And through it all, Aaliyah stood motionless, her face still streaked with frosting, her gaze steady as if she were studying each person in the room. She wasn't broken. She was observing, memorizing. Each insult, each glance, each person who chose to stay silent. The ballroom air grew heavier. Phones hovered in the air, capturing every word, every cruel smirk. Somewhere near the bar, A young intern whispered, "She's live streaming this?" Another replied, "Yeah, it's on the Whitmore Foundation's official page. Tens of thousands are watching." Aaliyah's eyes flicked toward the nearest camera lens, just for a second. Her expression didn't change, but that brief, calculated look said everything. "Keep watching." Madison, mistaking calm for weakness, pressed harder. "I told security to keep the staff out of this section," she sneered. "Next time, maybe follow the rules." Her words hung in the air, classism thinly veiled as decorum. The crowd murmured. One guest whispered, "This doesn't feel right." Another shook her head, murmuring, "She's pushing it too far." Yet no one stepped forward. It was in that silence, that spineless luxury, that the first crack appeared. Not in Aaliyah, but in Madison's control. The ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers. But something in the air had shifted. The laughter that once echoed now faltered into uneasy whispers. Dr. Alia Brooks stood still in the center of it all, frosting dripping onto her ruined dress, her hair matted with sugar and shame. But her posture remained unbroken. Her silence had gravity. It pulled every pair of eyes toward her, even those pretending not to look. Madison Whitmore tilted her head with mock pity. "Oh, come on," she teased, microphone still in hand. "Nothing to say. You were bold enough to sneak in, but now you're quiet?" Her voice bounced across the hall, desperate to reassert dominance. But it wavered. That tiny tremor didn't go unnoticed. Aaliyah didn't blink, her gaze fixed on the official camera operator, the one hired by the Whitmore Foundation to stream the event live. The young cameraman hesitated, then zoomed in. The lens captured her face in perfect focus. Chocolate smudges, glassy eyes, and beneath it all, a calm fierceness that pierced through the feed. Then softly, so softly the room leaned in, Aaliyah spoke. "Ma'am," she said evenly, her voice low but carrying. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." The tone was polite, controlled, but it carried an invisible weight that landed on every person in the room. The whispers died. Even the string quartet, unsure whether to continue, stopped playing mid-note. Madison forced a laugh. "A misunderstanding?" she echoed, pacing like a predator. "Everyone saw you rifling through confidential documents near the display table. People like you always find ways to sneak into places you don't belong." Those three words, "people like you," split the air. A collective breath was drawn and held. Somewhere near the back, a man muttered, "Did she just say that?" His colleague shook his head, eyes wide. Aaliyah's expression didn't change, but something deep in her eyes hardened. The room felt it, the shift, the unseen current of composure turning into command. The live stream's comment section erupted. "Did she really say that on camera? This is going viral. She's done." And while Madison smiled triumphantly, oblivious to the avalanche she had just unleashed, Aaliyah simply stood in that silence, letting her words and the world turn against her. The air thickened until even the chandeliers seemed to stop breathing. All around the ballroom, phones hovered like a constellation of judgment, every lens trained on Dr. Alia Brooks. Her silence had turned the crowd into witnesses, and witnesses into an audience. But outside that glittering room, thousands of people were now watching too. The Whitmore Foundation's official livestream, once meant to showcase elegance and wealth, had transformed into a global stage of humiliation and power. Comments began to roll across screens faster than anyone could read them. "Who is she? Why isn't security helping? This looks bad for the Whitmores." Within minutes, hashtags started forming. Cake attack. Gino NY Gala incident. Black excellence under fire. What had started as a cruel stunt was mutating into a scandal. Live, unfiltered, unstoppable. Madison Whitmore, still flushed with adrenaline, didn't see it. She mistook the murmurs for validation. "Everyone needs to understand," she declared, gripping the mic tighter. "These people don't respect boundaries. This is why we can't just let anyone in." The ugliness of her words echoed over the speakers, and the crowd recoiled. At the bar, a young server froze, eyes darting between his phone and the stage. "She's trending," he whispered. "There's already 50,000 people watching this live." Madison's mother, seated near the front, tugged at her husband's sleeve. Turn it off, she hissed. Now! But it was too late. The live stream had been mirrored across social media platforms by dozens of viewers. The moment was already viral. And in the center of that chaos, Aaliyah remained still, shoulders squared, gaze unbroken. She could feel the shift in energy, the faint buzz of justice beginning to awaken beyond those walls. The power that Madison tried to crush with frosting was now magnified by a million screens. Slowly, Aaliyah lifted her chin, frosting still dripping from her cheek. Her eyes found the main camera again. No words, just one piercing look into the lens that said everything. Keep recording. Let them see. For the first time, the crowd understood this wasn't just a scandal. It was evidence. Madison Whitmore's laughter cracked through the tension like glass splintering. The microphone squealed with feedback as she strutted back toward Dr. Aaliyah Brooks, face flushed with the thrill of dominance. Cheap dress, fake watch, probably stolen, she sneered, every word dipped in venom. A ripple ran through the room. Soft gasps, uneasy shifting, and the distinct sound of someone's phone hitting the floor. Aaliyah inhaled slowly. The sugary scent of frosting mixed with the metallic tang of humiliation. Her breathing was steady, deliberate, controlled. But her eyes were fire under ice. She didn't respond. She didn't defend herself. That silence made Madison even bolder. "Oh, come on," Madison continued, voice sharp with arrogance. "You really thought you could walk in here and blend in? People like you don't belong in rooms like this. Not tonight, not ever." Those words, "people like you," hit the air like a slap. The crowd froze. Even the band in the corner fell silent mid-chord. It wasn't just insult now. It was the quiet unveiling of everything the gala pretended not to be. Classism, racism, entitlement, all wrapped in champagne and designer gowns. A man by the bar whispered, "Did she just say that on mic?" His friend shook his head slowly, eyes wide. "She's done. It's live." Phones everywhere zoomed in on Aaliyah's face. Frosting still clung to her cheek, glistening under the chandelier like battle paint. The comments section exploded. "She said what? This is racism live on camera. Tag every news outlet now." Madison's smug smile faltered as she finally noticed the crowd's reaction. The laughter had stopped. The support had vanished. Every person who once chuckled now stared at her with a mix of disgust and disbelief. She tried to backpedal, laughing weakly. "Oh, I didn't mean it like that." But the damage was done. Aaliyah looked up slowly, locking eyes with her. "You believe I don't belong here," she said softly, "but perhaps you should verify before deciding who does." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The mic caught every syllable. The crowd felt it. The authority, the steel beneath the composure. The line landed like a verdict, not a plea. For the first time that night, Madison didn't have a comeback. A hush spread through the ballroom like fog after a fire. The line "people like you" still hung in the air, toxic and undeniable. Everyone could feel it. Something irreversible had just been said. The cameras caught every frozen face, every sideways glance, every nervous sip of champagne. Somewhere between shock and shame, the Whitmore family's glittering reputation began to crumble. That's when Ethan Carter, the hotel's general manager, stepped forward. Tall, polite, every inch the professional trying to salvage a disaster, he spoke carefully into the microphone Madison had dropped on the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice trembling with diplomacy, "perhaps we could resolve this quietly." It was the tone of a man trying to contain a wildfire with a glass of water. Madison turned toward him, disbelief twisting into fury. "Quietly," she snapped. "Nothing about this should be quiet. Everyone needs to see what happens when frauds try to trick their way into elite spaces." "Shearer," the guests murmured. A few gasped. A woman in a red gown whispered to her husband, "She's digging her own grave." He nodded, eyes fixed on the live stream counter, ticking higher. 60,000, 70, 80. Aaliyah didn't move. She stood in the same spot where she'd been humiliated minutes earlier. But now she looked less like a victim and more like a statue carved out of restraint. Madison's words rolled off her like rain on glass. Ethan's eyes darted to her, silently pleading for some response, some way to stop this before it exploded further. But Aaliyah's silence was deliberate. She knew the storm needed to burn itself out before truth could rise from its ashes. Madison mistook the restraint for weakness. "You're still standing here?" she barked. "Go ahead, pick up your fake documents. Maybe you'll convince someone else you belong here." She reached for her champagne flute and gestured mockingly toward Aaliyah's scattered papers on the floor. Ethan moved again, anxious now. "Ms. Whitmore, please!" She cut him off with a raised hand. "No, Ethan, let everyone see this. Let them see the kind of woman who thinks she can fool us." Her words turned the ballroom into a courtroom. Aaliyah, the accused, Madison, the self-appointed judge, the audience, unwilling jurors. The irony was perfect. Madison had just ensured that her own cruelty would be preserved forever, archived on 1,000 screens. And through it all, Aaliyah said nothing. Her stillness screamed louder than rage ever could. The silence in the ballroom grew unbearable, thick like smoke. Every pair of eyes watched Dr. Aaliyah Brooks bend down, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to gather the papers scattered across the polished marble floor. Each sheet bore Google's watermark, confidential documents she'd brought for the partnership presentation. She moved carefully, her dignity intact even as frosting streaked her fingers. But Madison Whitmore wasn't finished. Predators rarely stop when they think the prey is weak. With the full weight of her glittering arrogance, Madison stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, echoing like a countdown. Then, crunch. The sound was small but unmistakable. Her heel came down hard on Aaliyah's fingers. The crowd gasped. A champagne glass shattered somewhere in the back. Aaliyah flinched, but she didn't pull away. Madison leaned closer, her voice dripping venom. "Don't touch those," she hissed loud enough for the microphones to catch. "Security will handle your fake documents." The cruelty was deliberate, cinematic, staged for the cameras still circling like vultures. Ethan Carter, the hotel manager, took a step forward, his face pale. "Ms. Whitmore, please." But Madison didn't hear him. She was intoxicated with her own performance. "Look at her," she said, turning to the crowd. "Still pretending she belongs here. It's pathetic." Aaliyah slowly looked up, her hand still trapped under Madison's heel. The frosting in her hair glistened under the chandelier, but her eyes were no longer just calm. They were cold, surgical, the eyes of someone memorizing every second for later. Several guests couldn't bear to watch. One woman turned away, whispering, "This is cruel." A man near the live stream rig muttered, "She's going too far." And yet phones stayed raised. Every guest wanted to look righteous, but no one wanted to intervene. Their cowardice was proof of complicity, recorded from 100 angles. Finally, Madison lifted her heel, smirking. "Pick up your mess, sweetheart," she said, as if doing Aaliyah a favor. Aaliyah inhaled deeply, flexing her injured fingers, then reached for the final page on the floor, her company credentials glinting under the light. She stacked the pages neatly, rose to her full height, and faced Madison squarely. "You believe I don't belong here," she said softly, "but perhaps you should verify before you decide who does and doesn't." The crowd froze. Even Madison blinked, momentarily thrown off by the composure in her voice. Aaliyah's tone wasn't defensive. It was diagnostic, like a surgeon preparing for a precise incision. In that instant, for those who could feel it, something had shifted. The echo of Madison's heel still lingered on the marble floor, a cruel percussion fading into silence. The entire ballroom held its breath as Dr. Aaliyah Brooks rose slowly, one paper at a time, her movements deliberate, elegant, even in ruin. Frosting streaked her hair, her dress clung to her arms, but there was something unbreakable in the way she straightened her shoulders. Madison smirked, microphone still in hand, mistaking composure for surrender. "Well," she taunted, "got nothing to say now?" Aaliyah looked up. The lights reflected off her eyes, steady, sharp, analytical. When she finally spoke, her voice was low but carried like a pulse through the room. "You believe I don't belong here," she said, her words slicing through the tension. "But perhaps you should verify before you decide who does." It wasn't anger. It was precision, calm, command. The words landed with surgical weight. Even the server stopped moving. Someone in the crowd whispered, "She doesn't sound like someone who's scared." Another replied softly, She sounds like someone who's done this before. Madison laughed, but it came out brittle. Verify, she mocked. Sweetheart, we see who you are. Everyone can see. She gestured at Aaliyah's ruined gown, her frosting smeared face. No one needs proof to know what you are. But the crowd was changing. The first few guests who'd laughed earlier now exchanged uneasy glances. Some lowered their phones. Others couldn't stop recording. Beneath the glitter and silence, shame began to ripple through the room like a quiet tide. Aaliyah turned toward Ethan Carter, the hotel manager, her voice still measured. Would you mind verifying something for me, Mr. Carter? She asked. I think clarity might be useful for everyone. Ethan hesitated. Of course, he said carefully, sensing the shift but not yet knowing its direction. Aaliyah reached into her handbag and withdrew a small, pristine white card. Her hand, though trembling slightly from pain, extended it toward him with absolute composure. The crowd leaned in. Phones zoomed closer. Go ahead, she said quietly. Read it. If you've ever seen someone use calm as power, stay here, because in the next breath, she'll turn humiliation into history, and no one will see it coming. Ethan Carter hesitated for half a heartbeat before taking the small white card from Dr. Aaliyah Brooks's hand. The room had gone so still that even the chandeliers seemed to hum quieter. He adjusted his glasses, glanced down, and the color drained from his face. His lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Finally, he cleared his throat, voice trembling slightly as he read the words aloud. Dr. Aaliyah Brooks, Senior Vice President, Google Cloud North America. The room cracked open. Gasps cut through the air like shattered glass. For a moment, it was as if the entire gala forgot how to breathe. The words hung in the air, impossibly heavy, ricocheting through the marble hall like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Guests leaned forward instinctively, straining to see the card. Madison blinked, her painted smile flickering, as if she hadn't quite processed what she'd heard. I'm sorry, what? She said, laughing a little too loud. That's the best fake I've ever seen. But no one laughed with her. Whispers spread through the tables like wildfire. Did he say Google? Senior Vice President? That can't be real. Oh my God, this is on camera. The live stream chat exploded. Hearts, shocked emojis, and furious comments flooding the screen. Madison's voice rose again, desperate now. You think we're stupid? Google executives don't look like her. She pointed at Aaliyah's face, still streaked with chocolate frosting, her dress stained and torn. Look at her. She's playing dress up. The remark landed like a grenade. Every ounce of civility in the room evaporated. The crowd's unease turned into disgust. Not at Aaliyah, but at Madison. Aaliyah didn't even blink. Her silence was surgical. Her expression, measured, deliberate, spoke louder than outrage ever could. You wanted verification, she said softly, locking eyes with Madison. Now you have it. Ethan swallowed hard, still holding the card as though it might burn him. Ma'am, he whispered, is this real? Aaliyah gave a small, tired nod. You can confirm with corporate if you'd like, she replied. They're still open. Her tone was so controlled, so confident, that it cut deeper than any retaliation could. She wasn't proving herself. She was educating them. In that second, the narrative flipped. The hunted had become the observer. The humiliated woman now dictated the room's next breath. For a split second, Madison Whitmore stood frozen, her jaw tightening as if trying to keep her smile from cracking. Then she laughed, loud, forced, and sharp enough to cut the tension. Oh, please, she scoffed, waving her manicured hand dismissively. Google executives don't look like her. Her tone dripped with the same venom that had poisoned the room all night, but this time it didn't land. The audience didn't laugh. The laughter had died somewhere between the first insult and the business card. The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was damning. Even the orchestra, which had quietly resumed playing in the background to ease the tension, faltered and stopped again. The live stream captured everything. Thousands of people were now watching in real time as Madison doubled down on the one thing she should have retracted. The comment feed exploded. Did she just say that again? She's digging her own grave. This is racism on display. Aaliyah didn't move. She didn't have to. The entire ballroom felt the power of her restraint. The contrast between Madison's hysteria and Aaliyah's composure was a story writing itself, one that the cameras couldn't look away from. Ethan Carter still held the card, his hand trembling. "Miss Whitmore," he started, his voice low, cautious. But Madison cut him off with a bitter laugh. "You can stop pretending," she said. "This woman probably printed that card in a Kinko's. Look at her. She's covered in frosting. Does that look like a Google vice president to you?" A gasp rolled through the room. The words echoed too loudly, too cruelly. Several guests visibly recoiled. One woman muttered, "My God, she's lost her mind." Aaliyah finally turned her head, her calm gaze slicing through the chaos. "You're right," she said evenly. "Appearances can be deceiving." Madison blinked, caught off guard. Aaliyah took a single step forward, her voice steady and precise. "But it's not appearances that define credibility. It's proof." The guests shifted, murmuring softly, recognizing the shift in tone, the calm before revelation. Madison opened her mouth to respond, but the crowd had stopped listening to her. Their eyes were on Aaliyah now. Every camera followed her as if something historic was about to happen. And in a sense, it was. Dr. Aaliyah Brooks didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she reached down for her cracked phone, the same one that had fallen when Madison shoved her earlier. The screen flickered, spiderwebbed with fractures, but it still worked. The crowd watched, confused, as she swiped through her apps with unhurried precision. Then she lifted her gaze toward Ethan Carter. "Mr. Carter," she said calmly, her voice carrying just enough authority to command attention, "could you please connect this to the ballroom projector?" Ethan blinked, startled, but nodded quickly. Yes, of course." He fumbled for the HDMI adapter beside the stage, plugging in the phone. The ballroom lights dimmed automatically as the massive screens behind the podium flickered to life. And then it appeared. Across 20 feet of crystal-clear projection, the official Google Cloud Executive Portal lit up. Her photo, her title, her security badge number, the logo, the timestamp, the verification banner. Signed in as Dr. Aaliyah Brooks, Senior Vice President, Google Cloud North America. The room exploded. Gasps, murmurs. Disbelief turned to awe. The collective realization spread through the audience like electricity. Madison's laughter choked in her throat. That's fake," she shouted. "You edited that." But her voice wavered. A reporter near the front table whispered, "That's real. Look at the timestamp. It's live." Another guest murmured, "Oh my God, she really is who she says she is." Phones everywhere tilted upward, filming the screens. The live stream comment feed burst into chaos. "Confirmed. It's real. Whitmore's finished." Aaliyah didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply turned her head toward Madison, the frosting still streaking her cheek like war paint. "You wanted proof," she said softly. "There it is." Madison stumbled backward, her confidence collapsing. No, this can't be happening." The cameras caught every second. Her trembling lips, the panic behind her eyes, the humiliation she couldn't spin away from. Ethan lowered the mic and whispered, "My God." Aaliyah stepped closer to the screen, her reflection merging with her credentials. "You said people like me don't belong here," she said, her tone even. "Now the question is, why did you think you could decide that?" The ballroom erupted in applause, not loud but heavy, sincere, defiant. The ballroom was no longer just a room. It had become a global stage. The moment Dr. Aaliyah Brooks' credentials hit the projector, the live stream erupted like a digital earthquake. Comments rolled faster than anyone could read. "Confirmed. She's a real VP. Madison's done. This is history. Black excellence live." The viewer count rocketed past 100,000, climbing by the second. Phones across New York vibrated with notifications as snippets of the incident spread to Twitter, TikTok, and every platform imaginable. Within minutes, hashtags trended. Nurturing Dr. Aaliyah Brooks, Narc Whitmore Gala, Narc Whitmore Cake and Consequences, Narc Google VP. Influencers were already reacting in real time, stitching the footage, narrating the downfall of a dynasty. The gala that was supposed to showcase elite unity had become a case study in privilege, imploding under pressure. Meanwhile, in the ballroom, the energy had flipped completely. The same guests who had smirked earlier now avoided Madison's gaze. Some discreetly deleted their previous posts, terrified of being associated with her cruelty. Others whispered, "She's finished," as the live feed played her every insult back through the internet echo chamber. Madison tried to recover, grabbing the microphone again. "You're all being fooled," she cried. "This is fake. She's an actress, a con." Her voice cracked mid-sentence as her words were drowned by the chorus of digital outrage pouring in from the live stream chat. "Stop lying. Apologize. We saw everything." Aaliyah stood calm in the center of it all, not lifting a finger to silence her or defend herself. She didn't need to. The crowd and the world were doing it for her. One of the camera operators zoomed in on her face. The frosting was still there, streaked and melting, but her eyes burned with steady light. Her calm composure contrasted so violently with Madison's unraveling that even through a screen, people could feel the shift. The victim had become the anchor, the aggressor, the spectacle. Aaliyah turned toward the projector again, glancing at the live chat as it flooded with thousands of supportive messages. She gave the smallest nod, acknowledgement, not victory. Madison's voice grew shrill. "This isn't over. I'll call security." But Ethan Carter interrupted quietly, microphone trembling in his hand. "It's already out there," he said. "There's no taking it back." The crowd murmured in agreement. No one defended her now. The tension in the room was thick enough to feel against the skin. Every guest stood suspended between disbelief and awe as the projector glowed with Dr. Aaliyah Brooks' credentials. But Aaliyah wasn't finished. Her calm composure returned like clockwork precision. She turned to Ethan Carter, who still stood frozen, microphone in hand. "You can verify it," she said evenly. "Right now." Her tone wasn't defensive, it was clinical, factual. She was inviting them to confirm what she already knew. Ethan blinked, then swallowed hard. The weight of 100,000 live stream viewers pressing against his chest. Yes, Dr. Brooks," he stammered. I can do that." He fished his phone from his suit pocket and, under the eyes of the crowd, dialed a number projected on the screen. Google Cloud North America. Executive Division. The ballroom fell silent except for the faint ring echoing through the speakers. One ring, two. Then a calm professional voice answered. "Google Cloud North America. How may I direct your call?" Ethan's voice shook slightly. "Yes, this is Ethan Carter, General Manager of the Whitmore Hotel in New York. I'd like to confirm the employment of Dr. Aaliyah Brooks." The operator replied, "One moment, sir." Click. The line transferred. Another voice came through, warm, efficient, corporate. "This is Jenna speaking, Executive Assistant to Dr. Brooks. How can I help you?" The crowd gasped. Madison froze, her face bleaching pale under the chandelier light. The live stream exploded with capital letters. "It's real. Confirmed. This is live." Ethan hesitated. "Ma'am, we're currently at the Whitmore Charity Gala. There's been an incident." Jenna's voice tightened. "We're aware. We're watching the live stream right now. Is Dr. Brooks safe?" A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Madison's face drained of color completely. For the first time, fear replaced her smirk. Aaliyah stepped closer to the microphone, her tone measured but unmistakably authoritative. "Jenna, this is Dr. Brooks," she said, wiping a streak of frosting from her cheek. "We've had a minor, dessert-related interruption." The assistant's horrified gasp echoed across the hall. "Oh my God, Dr. Brooks, are you all right? Should we notify security?" Every head turned toward Aaliyah. Even the guests who had laughed earlier were now transfixed, watching the power dynamic flip in real time. Aaliyah's lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile, not of triumph, but of control reclaimed. "No need," she said softly. "I believe the lesson has already begun." The live stream comments section exploded. Iconic. Power in silence. "This woman is legendary." Madison stumbled back a step, her entire world collapsing as the sound of corporate confirmation sealed her fate. If you felt that shift, the moment truth outranked privilege, don't scroll. Hit like and keep watching, because the next reveal will shake the empire itself. The ballroom doors burst open with a heavy thud that cut through the stunned silence. Every head turned as Charles Whitmore, the patriarch himself, strode in, his tuxedo crisp, his silver hair immaculate, but his face gray with confusion. He had been upstairs entertaining donors, unaware that his family name was crumbling in real time. Behind him, two security guards followed, but even they hesitated when they saw what was projected across the screen. Google Cloud North America, Dr. Aaliyah Brooks, Senior Vice President. The color drained from his cheeks. What the hell is going on here? His voice was calm at first. Corporate calm, the kind that hides panic behind control. But his eyes darted from Madison's trembling hands to Aaliyah's frosting-smeared face, then to the massive projection flashing his daughter's mistake across the world. Madison exhaled in relief, rushing to him like a drowning woman spotting land. "Daddy, perfect timing," she cried, gripping his arm. "She's lying. She doesn't belong here. She was pretending to be one of your partners." The murmurs surged again. Some guests hid behind glasses of champagne. Others whispered, "He doesn't know. Oh God, he doesn't know." Charles turned to Aaliyah, his face shifting between fury and disbelief. "Is that true?" Aaliyah didn't move. Her voice was even, almost weary. "You'll have to define what you mean by true, Mr. Whitmore." The tone, professional, poised, cutting, silenced the room again. She wasn't pleading innocence. She was controlling the narrative. Charles's eyes flicked to Ethan Carter, who still held the microphone like a fragile relic. "Carter, what's happening here?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Sir, she's not lying. We confirmed with Google headquarters. She's who she says she is." The older man's jaw slackened. "Confirmed?" he whispered. "Jesus." Behind him, Madison's manic confidence cracked. No, this is a setup. Someone hacked the stream." "She's not," but her father turned sharply. "Enough." The single word boomed across the marble hall, the kind of command that decades of authority had sharpened. For the first time, the crowd saw Madison flinch. He faced Aaliyah again. "Dr. Brooks," he said slowly, the weight of formality sinking in. "Whatever's happened tonight, I assure you, this will be corrected." Aaliyah regarded him for a long moment. Her reply was measured, but the hint of steel underneath was unmistakable. "I don't think correction is possible anymore, Mr. Whitmore. The world doesn't unsee what it's witnessed." Her words landed like a verdict, and then the live stream counter ticked higher. 150,000 viewers. The Whitmore legacy, bleeding out live for the world to see. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The marble ballroom, once a stage for luxury, had turned into a battlefield of silence. Charles Whitmore stood frozen at the center, one hand gripping the back of a chair, his face pale as marble. He stared at Dr. Aaliyah Brooks as if trying to rewrite reality with his eyes. "Dr. Brooks," he began slowly, the name tasting unfamiliar on his tongue. "This has to be some kind of misunderstanding." But Aaliyah didn't look confused. She looked composed, terrifyingly so. She brushed a crumb of cake from her sleeve, then lifted her chin, her voice calm and crisp enough to slice through the tension. "No misunderstanding, Mr. Whitmore. Your daughter assaulted me on a live stream, called me ghetto trash, and questioned my right to exist in this room." Madison's mouth fell open. "That's not what happened," she yelled, desperation rising. "She's twisting it." Aaliyah turned slightly, addressing the crowd, her voice now amplified through the ballroom's mic system. "All of this," she said, gesturing toward the glowing projector screens, "occurred minutes before I was scheduled to sign a $4.2 billion partnership between Google Cloud and Whitmore Industries." The gasp that followed wasn't just noise. It was the collective sound of reputations breaking. Charles stumbled a step back, blinking as if the number had struck him physically. $4.2 billion, he repeated, his voice hollow. The number echoed off the glass chandeliers, bouncing through the ballroom like a curse. Aaliyah continued, unwavering. "It was the largest technology integration deal your company has ever pursued. A 10-year partnership that would have modernized your infrastructure and stabilized your market value." She paused, letting the words sink in. "A partnership that is now under review." The words "under review" detonated like a bomb. Guests gasped. Investors exchanged horrified looks. Several phones in the audience lit up as executives from Whitmore Industries scrambled to confirm the disaster unfolding in real time. Madison's complexion drained from pink to paper white. "No, you can't cancel over cake," she sputtered. "It was just a joke." Aaliyah's gaze was unflinching. "You call it cake. I call it evidence. Evidence of culture. And culture determines who we partner with." Charles's voice cracked. "Dr. Brooks, please. We can fix this." But she didn't answer immediately. She simply looked around the room, at the faces that had laughed, at the ones who had filmed, at those who had stayed silent. "No, Mr. Whitmore," she said at last. "This is already being fixed, just not by you." The cameras caught his expression, realization dawning that this wasn't just a public relations nightmare. It was an extinction-level event for his empire. The ballroom no longer felt like a room. It was a pressure chamber. Every breath, every whisper pressed against the walls. Charles Whitmore's lips moved before sound followed, his face drained of its practiced confidence. "Dr. Brooks," he began, his voice cracking like thin glass. "Please, don't punish 15,000 employees for my daughter's mistake." His words fell heavy, desperate, human. The same man who'd once been untouchable, head of a billion-dollar empire, master of every negotiation, now stood pleading before a woman his daughter had humiliated minutes earlier. Cameras captured everything: the trembling hand on his cufflink, the faint tremor in his voice, the sound of arrogance dissolving. Madison turned to him in disbelief. "Daddy, what are you doing?" she hissed, clutching his sleeve. "She's lying. You can't beg her." He snapped, his tone sharp with despair. "Enough." The word ricocheted across the marble hall, silencing even the camera shutters. "You've done enough already." The room went still. The guests, socialites, investors, politicians, watched the reversal unfold with wide eyes. The predator's family now knelt before her prey. Aaliyah didn't speak immediately. She watched Charles closely, her expression unreadable. For the first time, he didn't look like a CEO, just a father trying to salvage what little dignity was left. "You're not wrong, Mr. Whitmore," she said finally, her tone measured but cold. "Your employees shouldn't suffer for your daughter's actions. But actions have consequences, especially when they're broadcast to hundreds of thousands." The live stream count ticked upward again, 180,000. The comments flew faster than anyone could read. "He's begging." "This is history in real time. Power shifts right here." Charles lowered his head, defeated. "We'll terminate her immediately," he whispered. "Apologize publicly. I'll authorize a statement from our board tonight. Just, please, don't pull the contract." Aaliyah exhaled softly, frosting still clinging to the edge of her hair. "An apology doesn't erase humiliation, Mr. Whitmore, or bias, or systemic rot." She glanced toward Madison, whose face was streaked with angry tears. "You raised a daughter who believes power comes from inheritance. I was raised to believe it comes from integrity." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Admiration, guilt, recognition. The shift was irreversible. Madison stepped forward, voice breaking. "You're ruining everything," she screamed. "You can't just take our future away over cake." Aaliyah's gaze didn't waver. "Your future wasn't taken by cake," she said quietly. "It was taken by entitlement." And as Madison stared at her, trembling, it became clear that for the first time in her life, she understood what losing everything really meant. The ballroom had become a courtroom. Every chandelier beam seemed to spotlight the evidence. Dr. Aaliyah Brooks's fingers, still streaked with frosting and bruised from Madison's heel, reached for the leather briefcase lying near the stage. The one that had been kicked earlier, tossed aside like garbage. The entire room watched as she knelt to pick it up, slow and deliberate, her movements a performance of control. When she rose, the briefcase dangled in her hand like a gavel. "Mr. Whitmore," she said softly, her voice steady enough to quiet the murmuring crowd. "You asked me not to punish your employees, but the truth is, I didn't." She placed the briefcase on the table beside her, flicked open the brass locks and lifted the lid. Inside, beneath a few smudges of frosting, sat a single folder wrapped in a thin plastic sleeve. The contract. The camera operator zoomed in instinctively. The Google and Whitmore Industries logos side by side, gleaming under the lights. This, Aaliyah said, lifting it carefully for all to see, was the Google-Whitmore Strategic Cloud Partnership, the agreement that would have secured your company's digital infrastructure, preserved your workforce, and stabilized your public stock for the next decade. Her eyes flicked toward Madison. And it would have been signed, she glanced at her wristwatch, 12 minutes ago. A ripple of panic spread through the audience. Someone gasped audibly. Madison's face went white. The signing deadline has passed, Aaliyah continued, her voice calm but cutting. The system automatically voided the document the moment the clock struck 8. The deal is no longer valid. The weight of her words fell like an anvil. A hush consumed the room. Charles's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. His daughter's outburst had cost him billions. Madison staggered forward, trembling. You can't just end it. It's just cake. It was a mistake. Aaliyah tilted her head slightly. No, Miss Whitmore, this, she gestured around them, wasn't a mistake. It was culture. The culture your name represents. Reporters surged to the front, their phones raised. Flashes lit the room like lightning. Dr. Brooks, are you confirming the contract's termination? One shouted. Yes, Aaliyah replied. Officially void as of 8 p.m. She turned back to the crowd, holding the paper high. Your daughter didn't just embarrass me. She destroyed her own family's future, the most expensive dessert in corporate history. The crowd gasped, some covering their mouths. A few even clapped in disbelief. Live stream comments poured in. $4.2 billion gone. That cake cost more than an empire. Justice served cold. Aaliyah lowered the contract gently, her composure unbroken. Actions, she said quietly, always have a price. If you think that moment felt satisfying, wait until you see what happens when justice becomes official. She's not done yet. The arrest is next. The crowd erupted. Not in applause, not yet, but in a tidal wave of disbelief. Voices overlapped, a chaotic hum of gasps, murmurs, and the soft hiss of camera flashes. The live stream counter on the projector ticked past 200,000 viewers. Across the internet, comments blurred in real time. She ended them. The most expensive cake in history. Whitmore Industries just imploded on live stream. Inside the ballroom, reality was catching up to everyone at once. Guests who had come for champagne and photo ops were now witnessing the implosion of a dynasty. Investors who had once praised the Whitmore name were discreetly texting their brokers. Even the waitstaff, previously invisible, stood frozen in awe. The social hierarchy had cracked, and through that fracture, truth poured in like floodwater. Madison Whitmore clutched her father's arm, voice rising in hysteria. She can't do this, Daddy. Stop her. Call the lawyers. Call the board. Her words stumbled over sobs, but Charles didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the glowing contract, the voided agreement that represented everything he'd built. His empire was collapsing, not from market trends or hostile takeovers, but from his daughter's arrogance. Dr. Aaliyah Brooks didn't gloat. She didn't smile. Her posture was steady, her tone measured, her authority absolute. I warned you, she said softly, almost to herself. Power built on disrespect always ends like this. The live stream chat pulsed like a heartbeat. Screens around the world filled with hashtags, captures justice in real time. The cake collapse, Dutch showed Aaliyah Brooks, Tucker power in poise. News outlets were already clipping the footage. TikTok creators narrated the downfall in 20-second bursts. A global audience was now united in outrage and awe. Madison's sobs broke through the noise. You're ruining us, she screamed, her mascara streaking down her face. You can't just take everything because of a mistake. Aaliyah turned her gaze on her, eyes sharp with both sorrow and resolve. You're mistaken again, Miss Whitmore, she said. I didn't take anything. You threw it away when you decided someone who looked like me didn't belong here. Her voice carried through the ballroom like a verdict. Guests who once looked down on her now lowered their eyes, ashamed. Somewhere, applause started. Slow, hesitant, but genuine. A few guests followed, clapping softly, cautiously. On the projector, the viewer count hit 220,000. Madison's face crumpled as the magnitude of her actions settled in. Please, she whispered, Make it stop. But it wouldn't stop. The internet had already rendered its judgment, and it was irreversible. The applause faded into an uneasy quiet, the kind that comes before something irreversible. Security officers, two men in dark suits with earpieces, emerged from the edge of the ballroom. They moved with the steady precision of professionals who'd seen this before, but knew this time was different. One of them approached Ethan Carter and whispered something. He nodded grimly, then raised the microphone again. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan announced, his voice taut, "we have multiple witnesses, and the live stream provides visual evidence from 6 different camera angles. In accordance with hotel policy and New York law." He turned toward Madison, who was trembling visibly. "Miss Whitmore, you are under arrest for assault." The words hit the air like a gavel. Madison's mouth fell open. "No, no, that's insane," she shouted, backing away. "It was just cake. You can't arrest me for cake." The nearest officer stepped forward calmly, producing handcuffs. "Ma'am," he said, his tone professional but firm, "you assaulted a guest. The incident was live-streamed to hundreds of thousands of people. You have the right to remain silent." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Madison stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. "Daddy, tell them to stop," she screamed. "You can't let them do this to me." But Charles didn't move. His head hung low, shame carved into every line of his face. He whispered almost inaudibly, "There's nothing I can do, Madison." The officers grasped her wrists. The click of the cuffs was deafening. Cameras flashed like lightning. Some guests covered their mouths. Others didn't bother hiding their phones as they filmed the fall of privilege. Madison thrashed, mascara running down her cheeks. "It was just cake," she cried again, the phrase echoing uselessly in the marble chamber. And through it all, Aaliyah didn't move. She watched, not with vengeance, but with stillness. Her eyes followed the scene with the quiet authority of someone who understood justice didn't always need rage to be complete. The livestream comments surged. "She's being arrested." Poetic justice. That's what accountability looks like. As the officers escorted Madison through the double doors, the hush of the crowd was broken only by the sound of her sobs and the distant flash of paparazzi cameras waiting outside. Aaliyah finally stepped forward, her voice steady and low. "Actions have consequences, Miss Whitmore," she said. "Tonight, the world just remembered that." She turned away as the doors closed behind them, the echoes fading into silence. When the ballroom doors shut behind Madison Whitmore, the sound was final, like the lid of a coffin closing on an era. The energy that had once pulsed with arrogance now hummed with quiet awe. Every guest remained frozen in place, holding their breath, staring at Dr. Aaliyah Brooks. The woman who had walked in unnoticed and dismantled a dynasty without raising her voice. The live stream kept rolling. 250,000 viewers watched in real time as Aaliyah stood in the center of the chaos she had transformed into order. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was the kind that filled space, commanding, controlled, and heavy with meaning. Every camera panned toward her, drawn by something magnetic, stillness as power. Ethan Carter stepped closer, his voice tentative. "Dr. Brooks, would you like us to end the live stream?" Aaliyah's eyes shifted toward him, calm and deliberate. "No," she said softly. "Let them see." The audience murmured, unsure if they were still part of the story or just witnesses to a lesson. She looked around, at the faces that had laughed, at the ones who had filmed, at those who had looked away. One by one, their gazes dropped. The weight of her quiet dignity was unbearable. Aaliyah adjusted the microphone on the podium, not for drama, but for clarity. Her voice, when it came, was low and unwavering. "You've all seen what happens when cruelty meets accountability. Privilege is not immunity. Power without empathy always collapses under its own weight." A few heads nodded. Some guests dabbed at tears they didn't expect to shed. The entire ballroom had transformed from a place of spectacle to a place of reckoning. She turned her eyes briefly toward the camera, addressing not just the room, but the world watching. "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone," she said, "but I also didn't come here to disappear quietly." Her words hung in the air like an oath. In the live stream chat, waves of comments filled the screen. "Quiet power. This woman's composure is legendary. True leadership doesn't need to shout." Aaliyah looked around once more, then gave a small nod, signaling the end of her address. But she didn't step down immediately. She let the silence breathe, let the world feel what it meant to hold power without anger. Because in that silence, the message was louder than any speech. This is what justice sounds like. The applause began slowly, one pair of hands clapping in the far corner, uncertain and trembling. Then another joined. Then another. Within seconds, the ballroom was filled with sound. Not the polite kind of applause reserved for a socialite speech, but the raw, cathartic clapping of people who knew they just witnessed a truth larger than themselves. Every beat echoed through marble and glass like a cleansing rhythm, washing away the stench of entitlement that had once suffocated the air. Dr. Aaliyah Brooks stood motionless at the podium, letting the applause swell, then fade. When silence finally returned, she looked out at the hundreds of faces before her, executives, investors, politicians, influencers, each one reflecting a different kind of shame or awakening. And then she spoke. "Mr. Whitmore," she began, turning toward the man who could no longer meet her eyes, "your daughter didn't just insult me. She insulted everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. She reminded us how fragile privilege can be when it's built on prejudice." Her voice was steady, but there was no malice in it, only truth. Madison was gone, but her echo lingered. Aaliyah let her words hang heavy in the space she had once dominated. "This," she continued, gesturing toward the empty doorway where Madison had been led away, "is what happens when arrogance is mistaken for power." Gasps, nods, murmurs of agreement filled the air. A woman near the front whispered, "She's right." Another said softly, "I'll never forget this night." Aaliyah's tone softened, the steel in her voice giving way to something gentler. "Power doesn't come from humiliating others," she said. "It comes from how we rise when others try to break us." She took a breath, steady and calm. Because dignity doesn't shout, it stands. The live stream chat flooded again. "Say it louder. This is history. Dr. Brooks for CEO." But Aaliyah didn't react. She was no longer performing for the cameras. This was her final statement for the people in that room and every person watching who had ever been silenced. She stepped away from the podium and looked toward the staff standing near the walls. The servers, the cleaners, the ones who hadn't been allowed near the front of the room before. She nodded to them. "Tonight," she said quietly, "you saw what real accountability looks like. Remember it, because next time, don't let anyone tell you you're less." The applause returned, louder, freer, almost defiant. And for the first time that night, the ballroom didn't feel like a cage of glass and power. It felt like a classroom. The night did not end in the ballroom. Within hours, the incident spread beyond those marble walls and crystal chandeliers, racing across continents and screens. By midnight, the video had been clipped, shared, and dissected by every major news outlet. Headlines blazed in bold fonts across breaking news tickers. Google executive humiliated at gala, turns tables in $4.2 billion scandal. CNN, BBC, Forbes, and Bloomberg all ran the footage. On Twitter, the hashtag #ChancharCake Empire Collapse hit #1 worldwide. Clips of Madison's arrest looped endlessly, accompanied by commentary dissecting every cruel word she had spoken. Business analysts discussed the market shock. Whitmore Industries stock plummeted 19% in the first hour of overseas trading. Corporate watchdogs called it a new benchmark in accountability. Meanwhile, tech journalists hailed Dr. Aaliyah Brooks as the embodiment of composed power in the face of humiliation. In living rooms across America, families watched the replay. Teenagers on TikTok lip-synced to her calm line. "Perhaps you should verify before deciding who belongs." Professors used her speech as a case study in ethics and leadership. Even politicians weighed in, praising her restraint while condemning systemic arrogance. Inside Google's Seattle headquarters, executives celebrated quietly. The board released a public statement reaffirming its partnership values. Integrity will always outlast privilege. Overnight, Aaliyah's internal memo to her team, "We lead with grace, not ego," was leaked and went viral, earning over 2 million likes. Back in New York, reporters camped outside the Whitmore residence. The mansion's iron gates stayed closed, its windows dark. Inside, the once golden family had gone silent. Charles Whitmore reportedly suspended himself from company operations pending review. His daughter remained in custody, awaiting formal charges. But for Aaliyah, the night ended differently. Alone in her hotel suite, she watched the footage quietly on her phone, not to gloat, but to reflect. Each frame of her humiliation, now transformed into evidence of power, reclaimed. She closed the screen, exhaled, and whispered a single line to the empty room. They finally saw. Outside, New York pulsed with headlines and hashtags, but in the calm of her silence, she knew this was bigger than one woman, one insult, one cake. It was a cultural reckoning, proof that composure could reshape the narrative of justice itself. If this story gave you hope, hit like and share it right now, because one woman's dignity just changed the definition of power for an entire generation. When the crowd dispersed and the ballroom lights dimmed, the silence felt sacred. The cameras were off now, the glittering noise replaced by the quiet hum of distant traffic. Dr. Aaliyah Brooks walked alone down the grand hallway of the Whitmore Hotel, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor that only hours earlier had echoed with cruelty. The remnants of the evening lingered in the air, the faint scent of frosting, champagne, and revelation. Her reflection followed her in the long glass panels that lined the corridor. For a moment she paused, studying the image of herself. A woman still smeared with traces of chocolate cake, mascara faintly blurred at the edges, but standing taller than ever. There was no triumph in her face, no gloating victory, only a quiet kind of peace that came from surviving the storm and still choosing grace. She thought of all the moments she could have broken, when the cake hit her face, when laughter filled the room, when silence from bystanders cut deeper than words. Yet she hadn't. She remembered her grandmother's voice in her head. Never let them decide your worth. Just stand. Tonight she had done exactly that. Outside the tall windows, the New York skyline glittered like an audience of stars, indifferent but watchful. Aaliyah exhaled, a long, steady breath, and felt the weight of the world lift just slightly from her shoulders. Her phone buzzed. Hundreds of unread messages, interview requests, praise from people she'd never met. She didn't open a single one. Instead, she whispered to her reflection, "Respect can't be bought, and arrogance doesn't survive exposure." Then she smiled, faintly but sincerely, before walking toward the exit. Not as a victim covered in frosting, but as a leader walking through the aftermath of truth. Outside the hotel, the night was cool and alive with city sounds. The distant honk of taxis, the hum of neon signs, the whisper of wind against glass towers. Dr. Aaliyah Brooks stepped through the revolving doors, the glow of camera lights flickering faintly across her face. But this time, there was no chaos waiting. The reporters had fallen silent, microphones lowered. Even they seemed to sense that the story had already told itself. She paused at the edge of the sidewalk, her gaze lifting toward the skyline. New York shimmered, tall, relentless, unapologetic. And yet, under those same lights, something had shifted. The world had seen arrogance stripped bare, and dignity crowned instead. Her phone vibrated again. A notification, Whitmore Industries share suspended. Another, Shankar Dr. Aaliyah. Brooks trending for 9 hours straight. She looked at the screen, then powered it off. Some victories didn't need to be measured in numbers. Aaliyah turned slightly, catching her reflection in a black limousine's window. The woman staring back wasn't the one who had been humiliated in front of a crowd. She was the one who turned humiliation into reform, insult into precedent, silence into thunder. She smiled faintly, then whispered to herself, "Truth carries farther than privilege ever can." As she walked toward the corner, the night air moved around her like a curtain closing on a play that had already changed its audience. Somewhere across the city, someone replayed the video for the first time. Somewhere else, a young woman watched and stood a little taller. Like this video if you believe dignity is power. Share it with someone who needs to see what quiet justice looks like. And subscribe to Black CEO Stories, where Black women turn humiliation into history.